The research base was usually a place of noise, machines humming, soldiers marching, scientists arguing over theories. But the moment the alien queen entered, everything stopped as if the world itself held its breath. People who had spent their lives studying alien species suddenly forgot their training. Soldiers who had fought battles across 2 planets tightened their grips on their weapons. Even the air felt colder, heavier, like a shadow had spread across the hall. The queen stood taller than any human in the room, her silver skin reflecting the lights above. Her eyes glowed with a soft blue fire, calm yet powerful. Every movement she made felt too graceful, too royal, too dangerous for the humans watching her. They had prepared for a monster. Instead, they saw a ruler who carried both strength and sorrow in her posture. But no matter how calm she looked, people whispered the same word under their breath: threat. Stood in the back, clutching his clipboard with sweaty hands. Compared to everyone else in the room, he felt invisible. He was just a junior translator, someone the base barely remembered existed. He had no medals, no authority, no special talent besides languages, and even that skill wasn't impressive. He barely passed the alien language exam. When they asked for a volunteer to stand in the hall just in case, he agreed because he didn't think he would matter. But when the queen stepped forward, the impossible happened. She didn't look at the commander, she didn't bow to the diplomats, she didn't even acknowledge the heavily armed guards surrounding her. Her glowing eyes scanned the room once like she was searching for something familiar in a sea of fear. And then she saw him. Froze as the queen changed direction. The soldiers reacted instantly, raising their rifles and shouting warnings. The scientists backed up, terrified by her sudden movement. But the queen ignored all of them. Her steps were slow, quiet, almost hesitant as she walked straight toward. He felt his heartbeat hammering against his ribs. Her shadow covered him as she stopped just inches away. He couldn't breathe. He didn't dare move. Her eyes softened, glowing like a calm ocean instead of fire. She said something in her native tongue, a language of soft whistles and low tones. Recognized only one word, one he had practiced endlessly but never expected to hear so clearly. Safe. The room exploded into panic. Soldiers yelled. Leaders tried to drag away. Someone shouted to put up a barrier between them, but before anyone could act, the queen did something no one expected. She sat down beside him. Not on a throne, not in a guarded chair, she simply lowered herself to the floor next to as if they were equals. Her long silver hair brushed the ground, her hands rested on her knees. Her posture was calm, peaceful, almost human. She didn't even look at the weapons pointed at her. She kept her eyes on, watching him with an expression he couldn't understand. Trust. Everyone else saw danger. He saw something else, fear hiding behind strength. Swallowed hard and sat down slowly, trying not to tremble. The queen tilted her head slightly as if approving his courage. Around them, the hall remained silent. No one dared move. Soldiers stood frozen, unsure whether to attack or retreat. Scientists stared with wide eyes, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. The commander whispered, "Why him? Why is she sitting next to him?" No one had an answer. Didn't either. His life had always been ordinary. He never believed he had anything special to offer. But in that moment, he felt the weight of every gaze in the room pressing on him. The alien queen, feared across star systems, had chosen to trust him, a simple translator who barely believed in himself. He wanted to ask her why, he wanted to understand, but when he opened his mouth, no words came out. His voice trembled, his hands shook. He felt like a child standing in front of a storm. The queen gently placed one hand on the ground beside him, a quiet gesture saying she meant no harm. It was such a small movement, yet it carried more peace than any speech the humans had prepared. For the first time since she entered, took a real breath. And for the first time since she left her broken kingdom, the queen found someone she could sit beside without fear. The hall remained silent for a long minute, the only sound the queen's soft breathing and the faint hum of the base's machinery. Soldiers shifted nervously on their feet, but no one dared approach. Even the commander, who had faced countless crises, was frozen in disbelief. He had seen alien leaders before, but none had ever chosen to sit beside a human, not like this. Not someone as ordinary as. Could feel the weight of every stare, every unspoken thought pressing down on him. He knew the soldiers were ready to strike at the smallest sign of threat. The scientists were scribbling notes as fast as their hands could move, their pens shaking like their bodies. Yet despite the fear surrounding them, the queen didn't flinch. She remained calm, her glowing eyes fixed on him, almost as if she could read his heart. She was beautiful, terrifying, and fragile all at once. Her hands were delicate, long-fingered, resting lightly on the floor, yet they radiated an energy could feel even without understanding its source. Her silver skin shimmered under the harsh lights, reflecting not just color but emotion, fear, sorrow, and something he couldn't name. The other humans didn't see what saw, they only saw power and danger. They whispered among themselves words full of caution and mistrust. "She could kill us all, don't move, stay calm." The soldiers' weapons didn't lower, but the queen ignored them. She only moved her eyes slightly, observing, studying him, and seeming to decide if he was someone to trust. His throat felt dry, he didn't know how to speak to her. Every language he had learned sounded useless here. He was just a translator trained to bridge words, but how could he bridge fear and trust, humanity and alien royalty? And then she leaned slightly closer, her eyes softening even more. Her voice came, low and melodic, still in her own language. Didn't understand the words, but he felt the emotion behind them. There was hesitation, pain, and an appeal for connection. He sensed a silent plea, "Please understand me." Swallowed hard and whispered almost to himself, "I think you're afraid." The words were simple, they weren't clever or impressive. They weren't the kind of thing that could save an entire base from panic. But for her, it seemed to be enough. The queen's shoulders relaxed slightly, her glowing eyes dimmed just a little, and she tilted her head as if acknowledging his words. The soldiers shifted uneasily, unsure if they should intervene. One of them muttered, "She's dangerous, she's testing him," but didn't feel danger. He felt pain, a heavy, lonely kind of pain, the kind that comes from losing everything and being forced to trust a world that only wants to hurt you. He noticed the queen's hands trembling slightly. The soldiers couldn't see it, hidden as they were behind weapons and armor, but could. The queen had been hunted across stars, her family lost, her empire shattered. She had faced betrayal and war, yet here she was, placing herself beside him, a human she barely knew. She trusted him when no one else did. He wanted to speak again but paused, thinking carefully. "It's okay," he said softly. "I won't let anything happen to you." The words were barely audible, yet they seemed to resonate with her. The queen's hand moved, brushing lightly against his sleeve, a gesture of connection. Had never felt such warmth from an alien before. In that moment, he realized she wasn't threatening anyone. She wasn't plotting or commanding. She was just scared, like a child in a world full of monsters. The commander, still unsure, took a step forward. "Move him, he shouldn't be this close." But before the order could finish, the queen's eyes shifted to the commander. The air between them felt charged. Could see it, a silent warning, not violent but firm. She didn't flinch from him, and for a brief second the humans understood something they hadn't before. This was not just a ruler, this was someone who had suffered, someone who had survived against impossible odds, and yet she was capable of choosing. And she had chosen. Exhaled slowly. His heart still pounded, but there was a strange calmness settling over him. The hall was full of fear, suspicion, and chaos, yet beside him, the queen was a quiet presence. He could feel her trust wrapping around him, delicate but strong, and in that trust he found courage he never knew he had. No one understood why she sat there or why she ignored the weapons, the generals, and the cameras. They only saw a threat, saw hope. And that hope, fragile as it was, rested entirely on him. After hours of silence, the hall finally emptied. Soldiers and scientists retreated, leaving only and the queen. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss, leaving the room quieter than it had ever been. Outside, the base was alive with fear and curiosity, but inside, time seemed to slow. Could feel the weight of her presence beside him, the kind of weight that demanded attention, not out of fear, but out of respect. The queen didn't speak at first. She sat on the floor, her legs folded beneath her and her hands resting lightly on her knees. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the dim lights of the room. She wasn't regal now, she wasn't powerful. She looked tired, she looked lost, and for the first time understood that beneath her silver skin and glowing eyes she was fragile. Finally she spoke, her voice soft, trembling slightly. It was broken English, words learned through hurried lessons and urgent necessity, but each one carried weight. "My planet," she began, "gone, my family gone." Her glowing eyes lowered and saw the shadow behind her words, the shadow of someone who had lost everything. Didn't know what to say. His mind raced for the right words, the ones that could make her feel safe. But there were no words strong enough for that, so he did the only thing he could. He listened. I ran, she continued, her hands shaking slightly. I ran from war, they wanted my life. Her voice cracked and she pressed her forehead against her knees. I alone felt a pang of sorrow deeper than anything he had experienced before. He thought about the people he loved, the family he took for granted, and realized how terrifying it would be to lose everything. To have no home, no friends, no one to trust. And yet here she was, an alien queen, the most feared being in the galaxy, placing her trust entirely on him. It's not your fault, said gently, kneeling beside her. You don't have to face this alone. She lifted her eyes to him, surprised. His words were simple, they weren't clever, they weren't diplomatic, but they carried something far stronger: honesty. And for the queen, honesty was rare. Most humans looked at her with fear, respect, or greed, but he looked at her with understanding. You trust me? She asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Swallowed, I do, I'll stay with you, I won't leave. The queen's lips trembled. She had never expected someone like him, someone so ordinary, to offer such an extraordinary thing: loyalty without power, without fear, without reward. She reached out slowly, placing her hand lightly on his arm, a gesture of connection in her culture. No one trusted me before. Felt a shiver run through him at the touch. There was no threat in it, no demand, only trust, only hope. You're safe now, he whispered, I promise. For a long time, she said nothing. She just rested her hand on his arm, allowing herself to feel what she hadn't felt in years: relief, comfort, and even a flicker of hope. For the first time in her life, she could imagine a future where she wasn't hunted, where she wasn't feared, where she wasn't alone. I never thought, she began, hesitating, never thought human could understand. Her glowing eyes softened and felt the enormity of what she was saying. Humans had destroyed her planet. Humans had been part of the forces that hunted her kind, and yet here he was, the first human she could truly trust. Shook his head. Not all humans are like that. I'm here, that's what matters. A small smile, fragile and beautiful, touched her lips. It was almost like sunlight breaking through clouds. Realized in that moment that it didn't take power or armies to make a difference. Sometimes it only took one human to stand beside someone who had no one else. She leaned slightly closer and for the first time saw her as more than a queen. She was just a being, vulnerable, frightened, and yearning for connection. And he was the one she chose to lean on. Stay with me, she asked quietly. Nodded without hesitation, always. And in that simple promise, a bond was formed stronger than fear, stronger than power, stronger than distance or species. The alien queen, feared across galaxies, had finally found someone she could trust. And the ordinary translator had finally found a purpose beyond words, a purpose in protecting hope itself. In the quiet of that room, with the outside world still filled with fear and suspicion, something new began, something powerful, something that would change not just their lives but the course of everything to come. The queen rested her hand on his and for the first time in a long time didn't feel small. He felt important, he felt brave, he felt human. The next morning the base was buzzing with tension. Alarms rang in the distance, military officers paced and scientists whispered frantically to each other. News had reached the council. An alien queen had entered human territory, and worse, she had chosen to sit beside a junior translator, a human the world did not trust. Panic spread like wildfire. The council arrived in a convoy of armored vehicles, their faces set with cold calculation. They were not here to negotiate, they were here to control. They saw the queen not as a visitor or a being seeking help, but as a weapon. Every eye in the council chambers burned with suspicion. Every word they spoke carried fear, power, and expectation. She is dangerous, one council member said sharply, pointing to the queen. She could destroy us all. Another shook their head, or she could be an asset. Either way, she must be contained. Stood beside the queen, holding her hand lightly, trying to give her courage. Her glowing eyes met his, and in them he saw a mix of fear and relief. She had survived wars, betrayals, and the destruction of her planet. Now she faced another kind of threat, humans who should have been allies but saw her only as a weapon. The queen's hands trembled as she lowered her gaze. They want, she whispered, her voice barely audible, want me gone. Squeezed her hand gently. Not if I can help it, he said. We'll face this together. The council didn't care about trust or compassion. They demanded answers, control, and obedience. They ordered the queen to be confined to a secured chamber, claiming she was too unpredictable, too powerful, too alien. Soldiers moved to escort her, weapons at the ready, and the queen remained silent, her face calm but her body tense. "Stepped forward, she's not dangerous," he said, his voice steady despite the fear rising inside him. The council's leader looked down at him, eyes narrowing. "You're a translator," she said. "What do you know of danger?" His heart pounded. He was not a soldier, he was not a diplomat, he was just a human, ordinary in every way, and yet he felt a fire inside, a courage born not of strength but of compassion. "I know her," he said. "She is scared, yes, she has been hunted, but she does not want to harm anyone here." The room erupted into murmurs. Some laughed, others scoffed, and a few whispered in disbelief. A junior translator telling the council how to treat a galactic queen, it was absurd. "She conquered star systems," another council member argued. "She could destroy worlds if she wanted." Shook his head. "She ran from war, she lost everything she loved. She is not here to conquer, she is here because she has nowhere else to go." The soldiers approached, ready to enforce the council's orders. The queen looked at, and for the first time, fear crossed her glowing eyes. She gripped his sleeve tightly, refusing to let go. In that small gesture understood everything. She trusted him, she was placing her life in his hands, and he could not fail her. He stepped in front of her, his voice grew louder, trembling but unwavering. "You will not touch her, she trusts me and I trust her. If anyone tries to harm her, they will have to go through me first." The council paused. Weapons were still raised, but a strange silence fell over the room. None of them had expected a human to act with such defiance, not for ambition, not for fame, not for power, but purely for someone else's safety. The queen looked at him, eyes wide with a mix of astonishment and relief. No one had ever defended her like this. Not her advisors, not her generals, not even her closest allies across the stars. Only this human, trembling and ordinary had stood up for her. "You brave," she said softly, her glowing voice filled with emotion. "Brave human." Shook his head, trying to ignore the fear rising in his chest. "I'm not brave," he said. "I'm just the one you trusted, that's enough for me." For a moment, the council seemed unsure. They had dealt with threats, conquerors, and alien powers before, but they had never seen this. A human acting for compassion, defending an alien queen because it was right, not because it served them. The queen relaxed slightly, still holding his sleeve. Her trust in him was clear, undeniable, and realized something profound. In a galaxy full of fear, suspicion, and power struggles, it was trust and courage that mattered most, not armies, not weapons, not authority. He looked at the council and straightened his spine. "She came to us for help," he said. "She trusted me, so if she stays, I stay with her, and if they try to harm her, I face them too." The room held its breath. Outside the small chamber, the base continued its chaos, but inside something had shifted. Fear met compassion, power met courage, and one human, standing for what was right, had become the bridge between two worlds. The queen squeezed his hand lightly. For her, that small gesture was everything. And for her, he finally understood the meaning of true responsibility, protecting someone not because it was his duty but because it was their right. And in that moment, he knew their bond would change everything that followed. Night fell over the base, but the lights inside the chamber stayed bright, harsh, and unyielding. Outside, the wind howled through the empty corridors, carrying the whispers of humans who did not understand the bond forming within. Walked quietly down the hall to her cell, each step heavy with worry. He had spent the day watching the council make plans, watching them treat her like a weapon rather than a being with thoughts and feelings. And he had spent the day watching her, small in the corner of her cell, hiding the fear she would never admit to anyone else. When he opened the door, she was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, her silver hair spilling over them like liquid metal. Her glowing eyes were dim, reflecting exhaustion and despair. Froze for a moment, struck by the sight. This was the alien queen, feared across galaxies, reduced to someone almost human in her suffering. And yet, even in this vulnerability, there was a dignity in her posture that demanded respect. "I shouldn't have trusted anyone," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not humans, not anyone." knelt beside her, careful not to crowd her. "You trusted me," he said gently, "and I won't leave you, not now, not ever." For a long moment she said nothing. She just stared at him, eyes wide, searching as if trying to measure whether his promise was real, and in the silence realized that this was more than fear. This was loneliness deeper than anything he had known. She had survived betrayals, wars, and the destruction of her home, but this feeling of being completely alone in the universe, was perhaps the hardest battle she had ever faced. She began but stopped. Her hands shook slightly as she reached out to touch his. It was a small gesture, almost childlike but full of meaning. "No one stood with me before." Held her hand firmly. "I'm here now," he said softly, "that's what matters." She let out a quiet sigh, leaning slightly closer. The warmth of her hand, the trust she had placed in him, it was overwhelming. Could feel the weight of her fear and the fragility of her heart, but he also felt her strength, the strength that had carried her across galaxies and through endless loss. She had faced armies, but this was different. And now he was part of that battle, part of something greater than himself. "I don't know if I can survive," she whispered. "If they—" Her voice cracked and she pressed her forehead against her knees. His heart tightened. He had never seen anyone so powerful feel so small. "You can," he said, voice steady despite the fear rising in his chest. "I'll stay with you, you're not alone, you won't be alone ever again." For the first time, a small smile touched her lips, fragile, fleeting, but real. It was like sunlight breaking through a storm, and realized that this moment, the quiet promise, the simple trust, was more important than any battle, more important than any weapon or power. It was the beginning of something new, something stronger than fear. She looked up at him, eyes shining faintly. "Stay with me?" she asked. "Always," he whispered, squeezing her hand gently. "No matter what happens, I'll be here." The queen's fingers brushed lightly against his cheek, a gesture of connection in her culture. Felt a warmth spread through him he had never known before. It wasn't fear, it wasn't power, it was something else, hope, trust, and a fragile bond that neither of them could fully explain. For hours, they sat together in silence, hands intertwined, sharing a quiet courage that spoke louder than words. Outside, the world continued in chaos, but inside, a human and an alien queen had found something rare: understanding, safety, and a glimmer of hope. Realized something then, she wasn't just trusting him, she was teaching him something too. That courage wasn't just about facing enemies. It was about standing beside someone when the world wanted to tear them apart. It was about being brave for another person simply because it was right. The night grew darker, and the hum of the bass became a soft background noise. She leaned against him slightly, her head brushing his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, she let herself relax, let herself feel human in a way she never had before. Held her, careful and protective, knowing that this fragile trust between them was stronger than fear, stronger than power, and stronger than any council order. And in that quiet night knew that no matter what tomorrow brought, council threats, soldiers, or worlds demanding control, he would stand with her. Not because it was his duty, not because it was smart, but because she had trusted him when no one else would. And for the first time, the alien queen felt something she hadn't felt in centuries: safe. The following morning the base was tense, almost suffocating. Soldiers moved like shadows along the halls, and the council's presence hung over every corner like a storm cloud. Woke early knowing the danger had not passed. The queen's cell, which had felt safe the night before, now felt like a cage. The council had made their decision. She was too powerful, too unpredictable, too alien. And in their minds, too dangerous to live freely among humans. Word reached through a hurried soldier: the council had ordered her execution. His chest tightened, every breath felt sharp, every heartbeat a drum of fear. He had spent hours beside her, listening, comforting, learning her fears, and now someone else decided her life was theirs to take. He couldn't let it happen, not after she had trusted him, not after she had shared her pain, her past, her vulnerability with him. Ran down the hall faster than he ever thought possible. His legs burned, his mind raced, but he didn't stop. He knew he had to reach her before the soldiers did. He had to be her shield. When he reached the cell, the soldiers were already there, their weapons ready, their faces hard with duty. The queen stood in the center, tall and poised, but there was a difference. She wasn't threatening. She wasn't angry. She was resigned. Her glowing eyes, normally fierce and commanding, now shimmered with sorrow. His chest ached. He had never seen anyone so powerful look so small. He stepped forward, hands trembling, voice shaking but clear. "Stop!" he shouted. "You will shoot me first." The soldiers froze. The queen turned her eyes toward him, a flicker of surprise in the glowing light. She hadn't expected this human, ordinary, trembling, fearful to face death for her, and yet he did not falter. "Step aside," the commander ordered, disbelief in his voice. "This human cannot stop us." Took a deep breath. "I'm not stopping you because I can," he said. "I'm stopping you because I will not let her die. She trusted me, and I trust her. If anyone harms her, they harm me too." For a moment, silence fell. The room seemed to shrink around them. The soldiers' weapons wavered. They had faced warriors, conquerors, and empires, but they had never seen someone stand so fully for another person, so vulnerable and so strong at the same time. The queen looked at, eyes wide with awe and disbelief. No one had ever stood for her like this. Not generals, not advisors, not allies across galaxies. Only this human, trembling and ordinary, had chosen courage over fear. "You brave human," she whispered, her voice barely audible, trembling with emotion. "Brave for me." Shook his head. "I'm not brave," he said. "I'm just the one you trusted. That's enough for me." A flicker of hope appeared in her eyes, as if she had never realized someone could care so much. And in that small spark found strength he did not know he had. He did not fear the weapons anymore. He did not fear the council. His only fear was failing her, and he would not. Slowly she stepped forward, placing her hand on his shoulder. The soldiers tensed, unsure whether she would attack or flee, but she did neither. She stood calmly, radiating trust and confidence, not in herself but in. The hand on his shoulder was a signal, a silent message: "I believe in you." The room held its breath. Outside, alarms continued to ring, but inside, time seemed suspended. Fear met courage, power met trust. And in that moment, one human and one alien queen became a single force. The commander hesitated, then lowered his weapon slightly. Another soldier followed. The council members exchanged uncertain glances. They had expected a battle, but instead they saw something else, an act of compassion, bravery, and trust that transcended rank, species, and fear. His voice grew steadier, stronger. "She came to us for help," he said. "She trusted me, and I will not betray that trust. If anyone tries to harm her, they will have to go through me first, and I am not afraid." The queen's hand squeezed his lightly, a small gesture of gratitude and trust. For her, it was everything. And for he realized the truth: sometimes courage wasn't about fighting with weapons or armies. It was about standing for someone else when the world told you to stand aside. And in that quiet, powerful stand, everything shifted. Fear began to falter, authority wavered, and the bond between and the queen, born from trust, respect, and understanding, grew stronger than any threat around them. The queen's silver eyes glowed brighter, not with anger or fear, but with hope, and knew in the depths of his heart that no matter what came next, they would face it together.